Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. This podcast is brought to you by my free e-course, How to Stop Yelling at Your Kids. It's for all of us who would like to be a little bit more calm and feel more confident as parents. And it is always a place to start with peaceful parenting, and it's a place to go back to if we've fallen off the wagon, because peaceful parenting doesn't mean that you never get upset with your kids. It means that you know how to calm yourself when you are starting to feel upset, annoyed, frustrated, angry. It doesn't mean that we don't have those human emotions. It means that we learn how to take care of ourselves so that we don't take them out on our kids, so that we can respond rather than react out of our own triggers. So if this sounds like it might be helpful for you, go to sarahrosensweet.com/yelling. It's a free e-course. I've had thousands of parents go through it, and I've had some amazing feedback about how helpful it has been for them. So sarahrosensweet.com/yelling if you want to take that step and really feel a lot more calm and confident in your parenting. It works if you do it. Today's guest is a colleague and friend of mine, Casey O'Rourke. Casey is a facilitator of personal growth and development. Her work encourages parents to discover the purpose of their journey while also providing them with tools and a shift of mindset that allows them to deepen their relationships with themselves and their families. She began her positive discipline journey in 2007 and is now a lead trainer and certified coach. She's led countless groups through workshops and classes that have left them feeling empowered and excited about parenting. She also has a fantastic podcast, Joyful Courage, which now has over 300 episodes and more than 1 million downloads. She offers live and online classes, individual coaching, and her first book is Joyful Courage, Calming the Drama and Taking Control of Your Parenting Journey. Casey lives in the Pacific Northwest with her greatest teachers, her husband, and 2 teenage kids. You can find her at besproutable.com/teens. I invited Casey on the podcast today because she's been through an incredibly tough couple of years. Her husband was diagnosed with cancer, her teenage daughter, who's now 19, who, by the way, gives her full permission to talk about her struggles and her journey. In late middle school, started to have some issues with anxiety and depression, and that's been a real difficult journey for all of them. And Casey, and as she reminds me in the podcast, also there was a global pandemic that happened in the midst of all of this. And so I thought Casey was uniquely qualified and positioned to help us understand how we get through hard things as a family, and especially so because she's doing this from positive discipline. I'm peaceful parenting, but they're very, very similar. So she's doing this difficult family stuff through the lens of her philosophy that we share. So I wanted to talk to her about her journey, and you get to listen in on it. It's really quite amazing. And I wanted her to share with us, how do you get through these hard things, and how has peaceful parenting helped her? Let's meet Casey O'Rourke. Hi, Casey. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, listeners, for including me into your community today.
Oh, I'm so glad, because I have been on your podcast, so now you get to be on my podcast, and it's really great to be in each other's lives this way. So we've been friends for a long time, and I've followed you. We've never met in real life, but maybe that opportunity will come someday. But I follow you professionally and personally. I know that you have gone through 2 pretty rough things in your life, really hard things in your life in the past few years. And that's why I invited you on today, because I'm hoping that you can share with us some of the things that you learned about going through tough times as a family. And I know that, that things come up in our lives. And if we have some sort of strategies of how to make things more manageable, it's comforting. So just to catch people up who don't know you, your husband had cancer and he's in remission now. Is that correct?
Well, they don't, he has multiple myeloma, so they don't use the word remission. It is dormant. So we can talk more about that in a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he's not in active treatment anymore.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So, but that was like really serious, like just following you. That was a big, big, big thing. And then your daughter, how old is your daughter now?
She is 19 and a half.
19 and a
Now.
half. They still count
Yeah.
halves at 19.
Well, no, she doesn't say that.
Okay. And she had some struggles with anxiety when she was in high school and had some challenges around that. So
Yeah.
tell us the stories a little bit, and maybe starting with your daughter, because that's first in time, right? And then what you learned from that, and moving on to what you learned when you were dealing with the cancer.
Yeah. Those two stories overlap, and they are also joined by global pandemic. So, I mean, oh my gosh.
Of course.
Yeah, the last 3+ years have been wild. And we're recording in June of 2022. It was exactly 3 years ago that we also moved our family from where the kids were born and had been growing up to a whole new city. And part of that was prompted by the issues that my daughter was having, and, my husband and I being ready to leave that community as well, but thinking we were going to stay forever just to let the kids move through the school system, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, 3 years. So, with my daughter, she had always been, hindsight's 2020. Looking back, you can see the way that anxiety existed in her life. At the time, she was a kid who didn't want to order for herself, would get actively uncomfortable in certain situations. And, I just helped her navigate it and nudged her to stretch out of her comfort zone, not really understanding the depth of the anxiety that she was experiencing. And she was in a small environment at school and had a close group of friends. And so everything was manageable for her. And when she got into middle school, things continued to be okay. 8th grade, 9th grade is really when things got tough. And she, I mean, she blossomed into a young, moved from like a little girl to a teenager in all of her glory, and is gorgeous, and started getting a lot more attention around how she looked. And her experience is, look at me, don't look at me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that there was this contrasting tension that she was experiencing with the attention she was getting, but not really wanting it, but wanting it. And then at the high school level, freshman year, it was it was such a big high school, and the anxiety became really unmanageable. And now depression started to rear its head. And, at the time it felt like, oh my gosh, I've got this teenager who's going through adolescence, and she's in the peaks and valleys of emotion, and she's mad, and she's pushing away. And, it was very teenager-esque, but it was intense. And as a parent educator, I thought, yeah, teen years, they're not going to be that hard for me because I've done all this work. And I expected high school, like I expected all the things. I didn't expect all the things in the first like half of the year, So, and we did have a relationship enough for her to be somewhat open about what she was doing, but not necessarily able to articulate how she was feeling. So, conversations would start with, Mom, I have to tell you something. And then the big reveal about, this is what I've been doing. And me being like, oh,
What?
wow, I don't know how I feel about that, and working on maintaining relationship. And, her highs and lows were very, very high and low. And then at the end of the year, she said, I don't want to be at the high school. I want to do online school. This was pre-pandemic. And I was like, online school? That's not even a thing. Yes, it is a thing. You need to sign me up. What about this option, this option, this option? No, 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 no. And so her sophomore year, she did online, which helped. And I was very aware that we had taken this entire part of her development, and it was no longer a part of her experience, which was social engagement. And it felt like we were in survival mode, So it was like, okay, I'm just going to roll with this. We looked for opportunities to be out in the world. She seemed to be doing better, but she wasn't intersecting with the things that created anxiety in her life. So it was really, really hard. And I know what I know, and didn't know what I didn't know at the time. That's when we decided to move. We came up here to Bellingham, and she said, we have a program called Running Start, which is high school and the community college. She was like, I think it's just, if I'm not in the high school environment, it's going to be better. She started, and about 4 or 5 weeks into the quarter, she said, I'm done. I'm done with school. It's not the right fit for me. At the time, we were worried about an eating disorder. Her anxiety was through the roof. She was talking about how she was counting her steps as she had to walk from one place to another at the school. So I was like, oh God, is this OCD? Like, what's happening? So that was kind of the spiral. Meanwhile, my husband was living with a lot of this chronic pain in his body. And I had been, encouraging him to see a doctor, and they couldn't figure it out. And then Rowan's, spiraling. And I'm like, okay, buddy, you are an adult, so you get to figure yourself out. We have a dumpster fire over here that needs an adult. That's me. So, and Rowan dropped out of school and dragged me along with her. I mean, it was not, I would like to say, I'm super open to my kids choosing their path. And I would say this, right? I would say this prior to my experience. Like, of course,
That's how you thought you would
yeah,
react.
let them lead the way. They know what they need. But being inside of it bumped up against all of my very deep conditioning around, like, I grew up in a family where your value is based on your accolades and your education. And even though I was like, that's not me, having a complete alternative story sit at the table was very jarring for me. Plus I was like, but isn't it, but is it not the right place for you? Because you're sick, you're having a mental health crisis. So how can you identify if this is the right move for you or not without, it was very challenging. And in the end, she was so steadfast. To her credit, she knew what she needed, and what she needed was to get out of that system, to move out of that experience 100%, and to start her healing journey, which looked a lot like her doing nothing but smoke pot and watch Netflix for a few months,
Well, she
which,
was burnt out.
yeah, she was, and the level of energy that was required of her, that had been required of her to exist for the last, the prior, her lifetime, really, I couldn't really appreciate that, because there's no anxiety in my experience. There's no depression. I haven't navigated that. So anyway, of course, I'm looking for helpers in the community, and everybody's got wait lists. I put us on a DBT wait list, 6 months. I was like, really? Like, what's the point if you're going to tell people they have to wait for 6 months? So DBT is dialectic behavioral therapy, and it's, designed for kids just like Rowan. And so I was like, fine, put us on the wait list. We'll see what happens. She trialed and errored many therapists. And then finally, it was like March. Meanwhile, we and the rest of the world is watching this unfolding
This
of,
was March. Oh my gosh.
yeah,
March 2020.
yeah, March 20. So this all started going down. She dropped out in October. Then we went through the winter, and my husband's still in pain. And I'm still trying to wrap what am I even doing right now? How is this, how am I supporting my kid? And really questioning everything. My circle of people that I reached out to got very small, but I just kept trusting that I just kept trusting that we were doing the right thing for her, and that she, that our relationship was good, meaning she would talk to me. Everything felt very real and in the open. It didn't feel like there was secrets, and that gave me strength. Right? That she would open the door. Oftentimes she'd open the door, I'd start talking, say the wrong thing, and she'd say, please leave. So, it's not super Pollyanna. Yeah. And so now coronavirus is unfolding. We're like, what is this? Is this the prequel of the zombie apocalypse? We're trying to make sense of this wild situation. And then March, and then somebody comes out to my husband and says, at work, and says, hey, if any of you guys want to take a furlough, we don't really know what's going on. He's a power line construction guy, so they worked all the way through the pandemic. And Ben took advantage of that and said, yeah, I'm out, because he was feeling, his pain was only getting worse and he wasn't taking care of himself. And then as soon as he took off work, it was like permission for his body to really shut down. And it was only a couple weeks before he started losing feeling in his legs. And the insurance company finally was like, maybe you can go get an MRI. And so he did. And that's when it was April 3rd of 2020. And the technician saw a gigantic tumor on his spine, like up towards kind of where his neck is. I used to know the exact coordinates, spine speak, but I can't remember. And said, you need to go straight to the hospital, to the ER. And then they said, you need to go to Seattle because you need a surgeon and you need the best surgeon. So, gosh, I took him to
What a
Seattle.
shock.
Yeah, it was like, whoa, not anything we were expecting. Plus I had been so distracted by what was going on with Rowan. I really let go of Ben, as far as like, I just had to trust him. And he's a worker guy. Like, he's like nose to the grind, power through it, very stoic. So we went down to Seattle, to Harborview, and the next morning he had a 6-hour surgery, taking this tumor that had nearly severed his spine. They had to rebuild the spine. And then 10 days later, we found out that he has multiple myeloma, which is a blood cancer. And, don't Google it because Google hasn't caught up to the research. So it's very bleak. And then we went to Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, consulted with an oncologist, and immediately he started treatment. So the summer of 2020, gosh, like twice a week, we were going down to Seattle. And good news was pandemic, no traffic. So that was great. That made it really easy. And a lot of more together time than we'd had in 20 years. And, we kept it very real and open with the kids. And as far as like my experience of that was just like, today is the only day that we really have. So let's just do what we need to do today and carry on. And so he did about 4 months of, they call it chemo light. So it was a pill as well as like shots and some steroid use that he had to do, and 3-week cycles. And then in September of 2020, he and I stayed down. We actually had a place to stay for 2 months so that he could go through a stem cell transplant, which basically wipes out, he had to wipe out his immune system and then reintroduce his own stem cells, which was good, to this like pristine environment so that, the cancer would go away. And that was really intense. And we were gone. We were down in Seattle for 2 months. I would come home like typically once a week and just
But you probably
restock
had
the
to be
fridge.
really careful too, though, with his immune system being down, right?
Oh,
So,
yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, like, the timing is so interesting, right? My youngest son started high school with me, like us in Seattle. He had to navigate all of that, but it was 2020. So he was all online. My daughter didn't have anything going on. So she wasn't going anywhere. Oh, but the week before we got the diagnosis about Ben's cancer, we found out that Rowan and I could start the intensive DBT program.
oh, good.
Right. So while at the time I was cursing this 6-month wait list, it was perfect timing. It couldn't have been better timing for us. And we got to move through this really powerful program around being with life as it is, radical acceptance for what is, while also holding a space that things change. And, for her, Ben's diagnosis really shifted our focus from, oh my God, what's going on with Rowan? Rowan's the crisis, to Ben's the crisis. Like, you are going to need to step into your own growth rather than being dragged into it, because there's a bigger crisis going on now. And I think that on some levels, that was useful to her. I mean, it took her a couple of months to realize, like, you can go to therapy or you can do the therapy, right? And so for her, it took her a few months and something clicked. And it could have been a little bit of maturity. It could have been what was happening in our family. but something clicked around, oh, this is actually for me, right? I can do something with this and change the experience that I'm having. And that was happening simultaneously with, this cancer treatment and the unknown of what it all meant. I mean, multiple myeloma is an old person cancer. So it's Ben's on the younger end, which was good. And but it's a range. I mean, as far as life expectancy, right now the median life expectancy is like 12 years, which means some people it's much shorter, some people it's much longer. And it's not, like I said, we don't say remission. I've kind of adopted this languaging around it's dormant. So it's quiet, which also like is in the air that we breathe, right? It's in the air of our family's experience. And I try to make sure that I kind of lean in and talk to the kids about that and feel out if that's useful or if it's not. Ben has his own mysterious way of processing what's happening. I say mysterious because he's not a guy that talks a lot, especially around like talking about his, emotional processing. Then I get to do my own work because he's married to a life coach. I'm like, let's talk about it. Let's roll around in it, and he's like, let's not. And so, it's a lot of, I feel like for me, the biggest lesson in all of this, I think it's probably a life lesson that I chose cosmically prior to this existence is surrendering control. With Rowan really primed me, I feel like, for the cancer journey with Ben because she gave me the crash course in letting go of my narrative of what I think it should look like, of living inside of uncertainty. Like I really got to flex those muscles with her. And so that when, there was a weird calmness and groundedness that existed for me as I went through Ben's diagnosis and treatment. Yeah.
Wow. I can't even imagine. I mean, you all have been through so much. And, thank you for reminding me the global pandemic is the nice backdrop to
Yeah.
to all of this that
Yeah.
was going on. Holy
Yeah.
cow. Oh my goodness, Casey. So I I'm struggling with asking you what I want to ask you because it sounds so like I want to ask you where's you already kind of hinted at a little bit, but like where's the lesson for families? And I say I'm struggling because I don't like the idea that there isn't just sometimes there's just suffering for no reason. Like I think I believe that like sometimes there's suffering for no reason. So I don't want to like glamorize your suffering and say like, let us all know what you learned from it. At the same time, I think it's useful to be able to have someone like you who has gone through such difficult things to say like, okay, well, what can you share with us in terms of like what helped, what didn't help, what recommendations you have for people who might be finding themselves in similar difficult situations?
Yeah. Well, I really have to sit with everything has a purpose. And I know that's cliche and but I like that's to me to cope, I have to hold that as my truth. Like there's what's here for me. And with the experience of that I went through with Rowan, what I learned through that, and she's still, she continues to be on her mental health journey. She eventually went and got her esthetician licensed. She got her GED here in the States, the high school equivalency. She got her GED, and then she went through a 6-month trade school program that she loved and is now working in a spa in town. And anxiety and depression are a part of the fabric of who she is. And she has a great therapist. She is more self aware at 19 than I was at 30. I mean, just the gift of learning who she is through this experience, it's it's really amazing. And she has, for me and my work, given me the opportunity to now be able to talk to parents with teens that are struggling and say, I know that fear and I know that worry and I know that from a very personal place. And I think that's really useful. One of the things that I'm working, and maybe you can help me articulate this. One of the things that I'm trying to really be able to speak to parents is the importance when things are really, really hard with our teenagers. How we respond to that is a huge determinant to whether or not, when we've moved through it, they want to be in relationship with us, right? Which, I mean, from the outside looking in, I think it's like, well, yeah, duh. But we're so scared in the moment, and when we're scared and desperate, we don't have a lot of tools beyond like coercion or bribing. Like, we don't know what to do. So we're desperate. So we're like, how can we manipulate this situation and get them to do what we want, right? And so a big lesson around that is just, being willing to ride it out with them, right? Being willing to ride it out with them from a non-controlling but very relationship-centered place allows for them to move through their experience being held, right? And I think it really influences how desperate things get, even when it's like, how could it get more desperate than this? It's like, yeah, it can.
I have a friend who is going through a similar journey with her child. And when she first told me about what was happening, I felt my fear response of like, well, like I didn't respond, I thought, but my thoughts were going along the line of, you have to do something. You have to stop her. You have to, like I felt my own desperation and fear, but I didn't say anything. And my friend went on to tell me that she's having that basically the exact same response that you've had, which is, what I said to her. I said, you're prioritizing your relationship and your connection with your child. And she still has you, even though she's going through all of this suffering. And what responding from a place of fear would be that your child doesn't have you anymore. Right. And, I think that a lot of kids, when they sort of feel alone, there's like all the shame, like not only are they suffering what they're suffering, but then there's shame on top of that of their parents' disappointment, disapproval, anger, right? So they're even more alone. And so I really admire both you and my friend for, you know, trying to like stay strong for your child even with the fear that you have, and just like really prioritizing that connection and the relationship. Yeah, I mean, it's just really interesting, like you both have had the same reaction. And I think you hear about what I thought when my friend told me about her situation. I thought, some parents would do that, like get them kidnapped in the middle of the night and take them to the wilderness, and all of those kind of those tough love sort of programs. And you can see how that is probably not what your child needs, but you feel so
Definitely
desperate.
not what my child needed.
Yeah.
Not, I mean, then that's not to say, yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother podcast, right? But like, I know for me, and I had those thoughts. I mean, I was like,
Of course you
what?
did.
And the question was, what am I willing to do? And here's this kid of mine who, to her credit, was like, yeah, no, that's not, like she wouldn't be coerced. And so because of that, like, well, like I can't manhandle her.
Well,
And
if you had
ultimately that's
tried,
if I'm yeah,
she probably would have moved out. She probably would be like, the worst fear living in a van under the bridge,
yeah,
right?
of course. They all end up there, don't they?
But no, I think that if you had tried to strong arm her, that I think that's where runaway situations happen, right? And this is the ultimate test of our, you call it positive discipline, I call it peaceful parenting. This is like the ultimate test when the stakes are high. It's easy to say we're not going to use punishments when our kids are little and they won't, clear their place or whatever, and we're going to find a way to work with them instead of, punitive measures. But there's nothing really at stake when you have those sort of problems, right? So this is like the ultimate test. Like, are you really going to stand by your philosophy that you've spent however many years teaching parents and practicing? And you did.
Yeah. Well, listen, at first I was like, have I been duped? Like, what is positive discipline in this situation? And I actually reached out when Rowan was a freshman. I reached out to my community of positive discipline trainers and lead trainers. And I said, that's when I did my first mini summit or my first summit. And I said, I want to do some interviews. I want to talk about all the hard teenage things. I only want people who have teenagers now or have had teenagers. And I only want to talk to you if your teenagers got into mischief. I am not interested in conversations around, well, we did all these things and everything was just magical. Like, great, good for you, congratulations. Not a conversation that I'm interested in having or sharing. And, I had 15 guests on and we talked about all this stuff. And, I think for me, the hardest part of the parenting is managing myself, right? Because they're moving through their experiences just like we did. And I was a teen that got into mischief. I did not have the mental health situation going on. I had different kind of layers just with blended family and divorced parents. Like there was plenty of like therapy there that I could have been doing.
Same.
Yeah, yeah. But I was also, drinking a ton and having unsafe sex and sneaking around and lying to my parents. They didn't know. Well, I got caught a lot with the sneaking around, and I'm a high functioning adult. Like, I think that's what we forget too. The more adults you talk to about their teen years, the more stories you hear about like, oh yeah, like things can go really sideways and everybody's okay in the end. I think it's the stories of things going sideways and then, dead in a ditch or runaway, trafficked. Those stories make us so scared, but they're actually a lot rarer than we think. And then so if we're using that as our compass, things just get really controlling and relationship really starts to fall apart. But so I think with Rowan, with that, the big lesson for me that I share with parents is, your response right now is everything. Like if your long-term goal is to be in relationship with your child as they move out of the house and start a life on their own, how you respond right now matters. And then I think with Ben and the overlap, I mean, I still kind of feel like we're in it. There's a lot continuing to unfold, like I kind of hinted at with his emotional processing and how he's is or isn't kind of coming out of the emotional trauma. And the lesson there, similar to with Rowan, like I can only navigate my own experience, and I get to trust that the people around me are on their timeline and it's going to look however it's going to look for them. And it's not up to me. Like, this is really good advice for me. Like just today, I get to remember every day, like it is not up to me to manage how they are healing and living their life.
Yeah, but don't you think that everyone would just be so much happier if we could just decide all the things in their life for them?
Yeah, I have a really clear picture. I
Me
mean, it's
too.
like so obvious to me. It's amazing that everybody doesn't want to hear it.
I know. I
Especially
always have
my
to remind
husband.
myself.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
I
completely.
heard this, sometimes you hear things and you don't realize how much they're going to affect you, and then you can never go back and find the source.
Yes. Okay.
So I heard this woman talking about how she was really controlling, and one time she watched her brother and her mother wrapping presents, and she she had to like cover her mouth and sit on her hands to not tell them everything that they were doing wrong with the ribbon and the tape and all of the things, but she didn't. And she realized that they actually wrapped the presents fine without her saying or doing anything. And she said that one little, and if anyone knows this story, please tell me where I heard this story. But she said that one little moment of realizing that she didn't have to go in and tell everybody how to do everything freed her. So I hold on to that. Like, it's actually freeing to not have to take responsibility for everybody else's decisions and what they do in their lives.
I know, but there's like a way to wrap a present though. I mean, or fold a towel.
Yeah.
Come on, you guys. Yeah, I know. I mean, and it's funny, like, folding laundry. Like that's just something I do. I like folding laundry. I'm good at it. Everybody else gets to cycle their laundry through, but more likely than not, I'm folding it. And as long as I'm not resentful about it, it's fine. Right. And that's what I tell parents too. Like, if you're doing something for your family and you're feeling resentful about it, you've got a problem. But if you're doing it and it's fine and you just kind of are laughing at yourself that this is your own little special thing, then, it's good.
Go
It's
for
fine.
it.
It's
Yeah.
fine. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, was there anything that I mean, okay, so this is what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that you are trying to look for the teacher in the experiences that you've had, that it has made you actually a better parenting coach and an educator, and that you realize that the only person you can manage yourself, only person you can manage is yourself, and that, the connection is what kind of got you through and what we all need to lean on. Did I do a good job of summarizing what
I
you've
think so.
learned? Is there
Yeah.
anything else that you feel like would be helpful for people to hear about these hard times?
Yeah. I just think that, remembering that as much as it feels like your kid or your family is the only one going through a hard time, it's just not true. It's just not true. I mean, we aren't privy to what's happening behind closed doors, and that's something I'm really grateful to my daughter that she gives me permission to talk about this. She's actually been on my podcast and shared about the same period of time and her experience, and I get tons of feedback about that because parents are in situations with their kids and maybe their kids aren't as open about what's happening. So when they listen to that show and hear Rowan's voice speaking her truth, it's so useful. And I feel a responsibility as a parent educator, as somebody in the space, to shine a light on the messiness is not an indication that you're doing something wrong.
Oh, I say that all the time.
Yeah, right? Because even in the like there's this idea that okay, great, I'm going to have this really great relationship with my teenager and that way they won't do anything stupid. No,
No.
that's that's
Yeah.
not how it plays out. You get to have a really great relationship with them. They get to do the stupid things and then they get to tell you about it and then you get to manage how you respond, right? Um yeah, but I think, where our influence lies in our relationships is in the way that we respond to events and experiences. So to want, if that's what we're looking for, which is influence, the best thing we can do is take care of ourselves, get our own therapy, our own help, so that we can be in response rather than reaction to what our family is navigating.
Yeah. Did you find that I imagine you really had to take good care of yourself, as you just kind of mentioned. Were you good at that, or was that hard for you? Was that a lesson that you had to learn, or are you already pretty good at taking care of yourself?
I would say I was good at it by the time Ben got sick. I wasn't great at other than, I set some boundaries. Like there was a couple family members that I would not get on the phone with when Rowan was plummeting because I knew what their opinion would be and I know how they make me feel and I decided, you know what? We can text, but I'm not going to answer when you call. And I know that was hard for them, but I was my own self-preservation because I knew that I was already on shaky ground around, I don't know what I'm doing, and so I don't need you to judge that. So that was one form of taking care of myself. I took really long walks, which was and we have a golf course in our neighborhood. And because of the pandemic, nobody was allowed to play golf. And so we got all these walking trails, which was really nice. And then I had my short list. I mean, my sister, Jamie, and my mom were kind of my two go to people, and a couple friends who also have kids Rowan's age that were having a hard time. That was who I called, right? Because I knew that it was quickly became, and even with Ben, and this is a PSA to everybody, it was so interesting the people that I would share about Ben, and they would immediately go into how they would feel, like in their own internal process. They would go into how they would feel in that situation. And so then they would respond with, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And it was like, that is not a helpful response.
My someone close to me got diagnosed with breast cancer and hated telling people because then she felt like she had to take care of them when she told them. And then I had a friend who was diagnosed with breast cancer. And when she told me, I was like, oh, I can't show her my like sadness or my shock because I don't want her to feel like she has to take care of me. And so I was like super calm and like, how are you, Lola? And then later I thought, I wonder if I seemed completely callous. So I had to phone her and tell her the story. It's like, this is why it's like, I'm really worried about you and like sad for you. But anyways, it's very complicated.
It is complicated. And, I love those people, and they were just having their own experience. And as I got to know, like, who's actually on my list, I just was really, I was really okay with just having a handful. There were people that I would text with, and then there were the people that I would actually get on the phone with. So yeah, just learned that. And I feel like that was self-care too. But those long walks, big time, and nourishing my body. I had I've kind of fallen off recently, but especially during that time, a daily meditation. I love the Insight Timer app I use religiously um, for guided meditations and journaling. I did a lot of journaling. I drink this like mushroom tea, coffee alternative tea that is, it's a whole ritual putting that together. So yeah, I mean, there were things that I kind of ritualized in my life that were just for me so that I could spend the other time of the day caring for, the kids and Ben. So yeah, it's wild. It's wild that it's 2022. Like,
Yeah. It must feel like a bit of a blink, either the longest time ever, or the shortest time ever, or both at the same time.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I have a question that I ask all my guests, and I'm going to ask you that, and then I'm going to ask you to tell our listeners where they can find you and find out more about you and what you do. So the question that I ask all of my guests is, if you could go back in time to your younger parent self, what would you tell yourself?
Go to therapy. Go to therapy sooner.
Preventive therapy?
Yeah, preventative. You don't know it yet, but you're going to really need this later. If I could go back in time, I think I would invite myself to notice the narratives that I was holding and to really question what I thought was, the path ahead, and be open to the twists and turns, and that everything was going to be okay. It'll get hard and everything will be okay. Yeah.
Thanks, Casey. Can you tell everyone where they can find you?
Yeah. So my podcast is called Joyful Courage, and you can listen to it wherever you listen to this podcast. Joyful Courage is the teen brand for a company called Sproutable. And so we have courses for families with younger kids as well as the adolescent kids. And that's my domain, is the adolescent kids. And you can find out more about our offers at besproutable.com. I'm on Instagram at joyful_courage. And I have a Facebook group for families with teenagers at Joyful Courage for Parents of Teens. Yeah. And I coach, and I've got a membership, and I do classes. You can find all that out at besproutable.com.
Awesome. Thanks, Casey.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.